Cut. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Transformation Leaders Podcast. I'm David. I'm joined today by my co-host, Shawn and I. And today we want to talk to you about use cases of AI. So there's a lot of buzz around about implementing AI. And the question that's always asked is, where do I start? And so what Shawn and I have done is come up with a hit list of items that we want to talk about and work through today. We haven't discussed this list. We actually cheated. We used AI to generate this, so neither Shawn nor I have really looked or studied at this. He whipped up the slide, but the point here is we just want to have an organic conversation around these, and we're going to kind of work through these just so that you can kind of see from an example use case of two people that have never seen anything through it. We're going to talk through it, and this is the type of conversation that you should have internally with your colleagues, maybe with your supervisors, and just kind of iterate and go through and get a sense and a feel of what this might be. We only have a certain amount of time to cover all of these, so depending on how the conversation flows, we may cut it short, but you'll get a good idea of understanding of kind of how to work and iterate through this type of stuff. So to kick things off, let's start with healthcare. If there's one thing that's a guarantee in this life, that people are going to sue people and people are going to get sick. So these are industries that are pretty safe from, not being around, or at least we hope not being around in a couple of years from now as AI goes through and kicks through everything. So the first item on the list, if I'm looking closely, it says synthetic patient data generation. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to leave it there. I've got a bunch of thoughts immediately, but I'm going to kick it over to you, Shawn. Kick us off with where you would start if evaluating this use case, if you were bringing this up and we were colleagues.
And David, this is a pretty common interaction we have with clients, right? Yep. So the key value and currency of Gen AI is use cases. And the most important use case is your use case, where you're going to make or save money. So this is commonly what me and David have to do in our day jobs. Is we'll talk to clients about these use cases. They'll come to us like we're doing here so that you could get a good understanding of how we would interact and what we would say. So healthcare is one of the most prominent areas and one of the most difficult for AI because most AI that you're going to use is cloud-based. And one of the biggest issues people have with AI is privacy. So what I read if a client would have asked us and come to us about synthetic patient data generation, it is because what they want to do is anonymize the patient data. They want to take the data that they have from a patient perspective and anonymize it so that AI can start using and learning from it. And data scraping and data transformation, data translation is a very common thing. I know a close friend of mine, another founder that I've talked to, is in the process of doing this kind of thing. HIPAA and AI are two things that are very difficult to combine. And so removing the personal identifiable information, PII. If you don't know what PII is and you're doing AI, you're going to learn it real quick. But removing the PII from the data so that you can see this. So that would be the first area. The second area that this may be is where the AI is taking from the industry knowledge and creating an example patient data set to essentially test diagnostic tools, test humans. Training using AI and education using AI is a huge opportunity as well. So those are the two areas. And this is, again, the purpose of this conversation that we wanted to have today is to educate you that the devil is in the details. And so stringing together 4 words could mean multiple different things. So when you have a conversation about use cases, it is best to bring forth more than 4 words, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of questions. There may be false assumptions. I told you 2 possible discrete use cases for this one label, and I don't know which. David?
Yeah, so one of the unique ways that I would look at this one is in essentially, well, I don't know, there's a use case within a use case. So let me set my use case up so that I could kind of talk about this particular patient synthetic data use case. And so my use case would be, you're building a new system, or you're augmenting or sidecarring functionality into a behemoth system, say Epic or whatever you're using in your healthcare facility. And as a result of that, you're not really quite sure how or what's going to happen. And the biggest blocker that I receive usually on types of projects like this, if the project hasn't been set up right from a readiness perspective, is that if you don't know what the outcome is, or get the stakeholders involved where the outcome is involved. In other words, the simplest way to say this is begin with the end in mind. And with that end in mind, start with maybe a report or whatever the output might be, whatever the KPIs, whatever the metric, build something around that. And then you use that synthetic data to kind of populate and say, hey, are these the details you're looking for? Because intrinsically to that process, you're going to find out the holes, the gaps, what's missing. You're going to get lots of great feedback, because typically people don't know what they want. They don't know what they want until they see something that they know that they don't like. And then they're full of opinions. But getting them started from vaporware or the theoretical principle of what could be or might be, this is exactly where synthetic patient data, or any synthetic data for that matter, across any use case, is extremely valid, helpful, and important, especially if you're in use cases where you're working with vendors, third party, outside of the healthcare. Because of what Shawn said, PII and HIPAA regulations, you can't use real world data, or you're in violation right there again. So there's ways around it, but you have to have all these consent forms. It gets real sticky and real messy in all of that. And then being able to have the audit trail. Anyway, it's a road you don't want to go down. So synthetic data is, in my opinion, this is how I would use it in the context of healthcare, and specifically in patient-generated data.
Yeah, I mean, these are all going to be a little bit of a curveball for all of us. And, David, I think you would agree that is our typical challenge when we talk with clients. They understand their world and industry and company and initiatives far more than us.
Yep.
And so there is a awkward bit of discussion required so that we can kind of grasp what they're trying to accomplish. So when it comes to a use case, talk about inputs, talk about outputs, right? Talk about the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And then kind of say, okay, here, this is what we want to call it. AI-assisted image analysis. The first thing that comes to mind is breast cancer. There was a very famous study where basically there's a 9 to 10% chance of, if you go for surgery for breast cancer, there's a 9% chance that they don't get it all. And then it takes basically 10 weeks for them to go back in and reanalyze everything and then get the rest. And then there's a 9 or 10% chance you have to come back again. And every time you do this, it is awful for the patient. So they were able to reduce, using this medical analysis, that down by an order of magnitude. It's less than 1% now. I remember reading about this, hearing about this, and it is a huge opportunity. But you've got to understand that the data here is going to be immense, petabytes of data that has to be crunched. You're not going to use an Olama model for this, right? So some of this you're bleeding in to machine learning, very, very specific models that are generated for this, that are bespoke, that the people who manufacture the MRIs and the X-ray machines will be building for you, versus what a ProServe AI company could do for you. Yeah. So again, really, really good, powerful use case, but this is leaning more towards the machine learning world because it's going to be very niche focused on the type of cancer and the type of data input it's going to be. David?
I think you just had a good segue, and I think because of how deeply we're exploring these, let's take maybe the first bullet from each of the category groups and work our way forward. And as a great segue to your point, under telecom, the first bullet of predictive maintenance optimization, this is another area that Shawn just mentioned, even though we very specifically and intentionally, with AI, of course, use predictive maintenance optimization under the telecom. We're going to show you how a use case can be agnostic across industries as well, if done at a high level generic. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because maybe you're not going to straddle, of course, unless you maybe have a new job opportunity in a different vertical, you could use this and apply it as you move from point A to point B. But more importantly, I think at the more scoped level, if you're in telecom, if you're in healthcare, you could do cross-departmental, you could do cross, whatever within your organization. So don't just pigeonhole yourself with these use cases to something too dialed in. When I architect a solution for a client, usually I'm thinking of the big picture, how does it work? And at first principle, how do I make this with what's called the core functionality? It's very generic, but it does the core basics of what needs to be. And then I snapshot that, put it off on the shelf, and then from that, I build out the actual use case from there. And this is the use case where we're talking about where it's industry agnostic, and then Shawn's talking about machine learning. So predictive maintenance optimization. If you're in telecom, you've got cell phone towers, you've got geographies all over the place. Probably over time, you've bought different equipment. Some of it's aged, some of it's newer. Like it's all over the place. So behind the scenes, you don't think about any of this. You just, you pick up your cell phone as a user and do whatever. But the technology behind this is intense. It's insane. And the maintenance intervals for the towers, for the software, for the hardware, everything that needs to be there is a tremendous amount of data. If you take any of the three major telecom mobile providers here in the US, you know how many cell phone towers that are existing on just the United States alone in the continental US? So it's immense, it's intense. So you're going to have systems like possibly Splunk or other things that have all this big, huge data pool, maybe data lakes. And this is where the machine learning comes across that Shawn was talking about. And then that predictive analytics, you can use AI in certain tasks, like maybe you're just looking for software or firmware updates. Obviously, there should be something like that in place already. But if not, AI can be used to assess your pool of data, your data lake, give it insights, give it interesting points of view, give it the analytics. Again, going back to my earlier comment, begin with the end in mind. Talk to the supervisors, talk to the executive staff. Where's the pain? How can we correlate that? Is there any data point that's there? Can we create what's the word I'm looking for? Synthetic data, which is not really synthetic from the standpoint that it's junk data. But in other words, as an example, if I have a full name field of a contact and I have my name, David Soden, but it's all in one field, you can create a first name and a last name field from that by just creating an AI is great at this, can just look at the field, split it, and then put it into two. You'll wind up with three fields. But the point is you made two non-data fields that don't exist in the data set from the actual one that does live there. So you can create all of this extra data. You can create additional fields to give you the points of view that you're looking at. And then at the end of the day, it can aggregate some whatever, and give you all these cool and interesting KPIs. So you can get down really deep into the weeds with all of this. And so I just wanted to tie together a little bit of strategy, a little bit of data strategy, as well as trying to use AI to help you bolster whatever it is that you're looking at for your outcome. Shawn, anything to add to that one?
No. I mean, again, excellent point in that use cases can and do bleed over different verticals. But, the most default thing that people say about use cases in AI is, well, you got to clean your data. Well, depending upon your use case, the question is are you going to be leveraging data from 10, 15 years ago? Well, the consultative answer that I always give that drives people up the wall is depends. I don't know. Having a conversation about what you're trying to achieve is the most important delimiter that we have to success. The people who are in that 5% of the 95% of people who are not succeeding with AI, the 5% is because they picked a use case that is achievable. You just mentioned a preventative maintenance system. Telco has hundreds of different models of devices on, maybe 10 different generations of technology. They have technology that's running in their network that's older than me, those three that you're talking about.
Yep.
So, it comes down to, yes, the most powerful use case, the most valuable use case may not necessarily be the one that's more likely to succeed. Having a use case, a very common one, like creating PowerPoint, is very easy to succeed, but it isn't as impactful. So you've got to pick your battles when you're doing transformation. Now, one that I'd love to talk about is under retail, the AI-powered inventory management.
Yes, that's exactly the one I was looking at too. There's so many ways to explore on that.
That is a really good example of, your inventory management system, let's just say it's SAP. SAP is going to have a module that you could turn on for a fee to do a lot of very interesting things. And looking at a buy or partner versus build model for transformation is not necessarily a bad thing. First and foremost is they're going to have a lot more out-of-the-box functionality that you can mimic, at least educate yourself on. See a demo of this. Ask them what kind of KPIs they were able to achieve. Like for AI-powered inventory management, how much were they able to reduce overstock, right? That is a number. That is an ROI value. You could go back to the business and say, look, this is how much our overstock is costing us. They say and can guarantee a 25% reduction. That is this amount of money, and simple math can justify some of these capabilities. And then once you see that, you could say, okay, this is how much it's worth to save. This is how much it's going to cost for the vendor over a 3-5 year cycle. You could do the math and say, is build versus buy a better profile for the business, a better decision? And then obviously buying it has one risk profile. Building it has a different risk profile. Yes. But the bottom line is that a lot of these niche verticals have out-of-the-box functionality that you can purchase or at least demo, and they can come to the table with a white paper or some kind of guarantee on ROI, and that will power your ability to get budget for it. Because no matter how cool AI can be, if you can't get the business to pay for it, it's a waste of time to talk and pursue.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing too that I want to also bring as a point on this one, this is an interesting use case. The reason I also looked at this one, I was wanting to talk about this one as well, is because it's so ambiguous that you could take this in many different ways. So Shawn mentioned SAP. That's the 800-pound gorilla, right? So that is like probably the de facto standard for most of your Fortune 100, 500 companies. However, for those of you maybe not as blessed to be able to afford or have the patience or tolerance for a system of that magnitude, because it is extremely complex to set up, manage, and maintain, that the other things that you can look at is opportunities of how can an AI use case enhance that particular use case. And so you've got opportunities to branch at and look at for, and this is where Shawn and I use the term a lot, or at least I definitely use the term a lot, is sidecarring functionality. In other words, it's something you bolt on to the main thing, and it's supplementary or anyway, I'm losing my train of thought here, but the point here is that with the inventory management, you have supply chain explorations you can go off and do. If you have APIs that will allow you to go out to whoever is your supplier to figure out proactively, hey, listen, my inventories are getting low. I forecast that I need to make a purchase in 30 days. What's the current state of the supply chain? Historically, are you logging that? Can you predict if you're going to have supply chain issues? Maybe it's better to order now because something's either in the political sphere or there's some war that's breaking out in the geography area of where you need to get your products from or get shipped out of. Another pandemic that might be coming around the corner for whatever reason, any number of reasons that might affect or impact your supply chain. These different points of views can go into your algorithm. You feed it, and you don't have to be a mathematician to solve this. You simply just give it to the AI with a very capable model. Most of them are PhD educated now, and say, here's my concerns from these data points. What am I missing? What else should I be concerned about? Add that to the list. And then in your final ask of AI, say, come up with an algorithm based on these suppliers, taking all of this into consideration, and then build me a solution. So if you're ever used to, you have people or you have vendors that can use AI assisted coding, you can crank out a solution relatively quickly and still maintain the high quality if you're doing human to AI assisted type coding or programming. So that's only one example. The other thing on inventory management, like Shawn mentioned, stock levels. So what is it going to do to help me maintain or manage or liquidate my excessive stock? Well, that comes to another bolt-on piece, a promotions engine. As long as you got customers, you got a way of working with them. You can give that, you know where they are. If you can figure out what social media, you've got personifications, profiles of, your accounts and all this other stuff. And if you don't have that, there's more explorations to look at. Anyway, the point here is that you can take this on in any way, shape, form, or fashion to look at different perspectives. And as a real mind bender, going one step back for where Shawn and I were talking about with telecom, if you think about any of the big three telecoms, within telecom, they have a retail division, sales, right? And within that, they probably have some promotions. Maybe they're doing a little bit, not full scale as an industry, but media might apply, finance. Yeah, they are industrial to some extent because, again, those cell phone towers go up everywhere. There's governmental regulations underneath that. They do use technology and, of course, energy consumption, green energy, solar, wind, whatever, to run their towers and whatever needs to be. So even if you're a vertical, it doesn't always mean that you need to stay in your lane. Look and see what other verticals are doing that are specifically in their sector and keep an eye on them, because you might have an aspect of your business that can leverage or use existing use cases. Don't reinvent the wheel. Learn from others and just rinse and repeat as much as you can. Shawn, anything else you want to add on that? Otherwise, we can pick up another topic.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to talk about it in the media use case, the automated content creation, because this is a really, really good example of it's incredibly applicable across all verticals to do content creation. However, in media, there are a lot more compliance requirements. So nowadays, if we upload or when we upload this to YouTube, you have to indicate whether or not AI is being used to generate this content. There are compliance requirements if you are working with unionized media creation on how much AI you're allowed to do. There are new government regulations overseas that you have to indicate that it is AI generated. There are underlying applications that are inserting watermarks to make it very easily identifiable that you're using AI in the content generation. There are government and educational compliance issues if you're generating this for training and education in those different arenas. So the technology is the easiest part.
Yeah. It's getting to be that way, isn't it?
And that's what's really interesting about this use case is it's not about the technology, it's about who's consuming it, right? The output. What we were talking about before. The input is really straightforward. The technology and value is really easy. It's the output that's the question, right?
Actually, I could add something to the input. I think, and here's a great example of this and a different way of thinking about that. And it's all right. So without getting too specific and keeping it high level, unfortunately, and this is just the way that it is, and it's not just here in the United States, seems to be happening globally. As governmental systems and parties move in and out of running our government systems, unfortunately, different governmental pieces, either within the government or even public and private sectors, are being polarized in their points of view, how they approach things. And the sad state of affairs is, let's use the FCC and the FTC as part of the US. Depending on who may or may not be in office, there may be an opportunity, or for better or for good, to change rules and regulations accordingly on the fly, whether it's with the stroke of a pen or through just our normal process of going through and changing the underlying laws. Irregardless, how it affects the inputs, and the point that I want to make here is AI has this thing called sentiment analysis. Typically, we use it in a simplistic and crack corny way of saying, here's something somebody said. Are they angry? Are they happy? Are they sad? Right? That's the most simplistic use case. However, AI can be used to monitor news, and from that news can extrapolate the temperature or the climate in which we currently are. It is what it is. It's a fact, right? And this is where computers are really great. By using sentiment analysis to gauge where things might be politically. If you're in media and you're streaming information online, or you're under the rules and regulation of, say, FTC, FCC, AI can be there on the input side to help you gauge, hey, are you close to hitting a tripwire that could cause a fine? It could do whatever. And so as inputs, we could use AI in a very interesting and dynamic use case way to help media gain some sort of an idea of where on this line are they, so that they can practice their uniqueness of whatever it is that they do and bring to the table for their audience, but at the same time try to stay off of the third rail, so to speak, and not get into trouble.
Yeah, agreed. So I'd love to talk more about the finance vertical, because like healthcare, the compliancy requirements, whether it be PCI or your standard high level fraud management is huge. So fraud is an enormous, big challenge that BFSI has, and as many other industries, by the way. And the problem that they have is that the frauders are using AI to attack. So it's one of those, you can't throw people against AI. So this is an area that is significantly being forced, in some areas, kicking and screaming, into we have to deal with AI because the fraudsters are using it.
Yeah.
And
it's AI against AI and prospectively fought.
Exactly. I mean, you're talking about corporate warfare on an AI level, where the security people that I've worked with in the BFSI are the most nervous in all industries, in my opinion. They are very concerned, and they see the amount of risks. Now, there is plenty of areas, and fraud detection is one of those areas. The frauds that are occurring, AI is helping the fraudsters come up with new and unusual ways to go after attack surfaces that have never really been compromised before because of the complexity. So back in the day, there was this idea of security through obscurity. Maybe you've heard that term. Well, guess what? With AI, nothing is too obscure. So it's really challenging a lot of foundational bedrocks that people are having. And being able to detect fraud has always been a machine learning problem. Now it's being way beyond that because of the complexity of which the fraudsters can act. And so using AI for this is something that isn't a nice to have, it is a must have.
Yeah, if you've ever lived in the country, or maybe your parents and you heard them talk about it, where you have a door, but you don't lock it, that's security by obscurity. The door is supposed to be able to be there to keep things out, maybe weather, animals, people, whatever. But if you don't lock the door or have a lock on your door, then, well, it's a false sense of security. And that's really a good way of describing security by obscurity. But here's the thing. As AI fights AI, most people are going to fall to victim. Rather than go off on talking about a specific AI, I think I want to use this opportunity to just tell you or beg you to please educate your children, your parents, if you're listening, or if you're a parent yourself, or even yourself as well. Anytime you get anything from a BFSI inquiry of a sense of urgency, usually it's false, telling you that something's gone amok with whatever, or if you get a proactive security or alert fraud where they ask you, don't ever confirm or say anything of yes. If, for example, I'll pick a bank. Normally we don't name banks here, but I'll just use one just to prove the point. What's a good bank that's national? Bank of America, maybe, or Chase, either one of them. Pick a bank that you bank at. You get a phone call, you get a text, you get whatever. Don't click the link. If the person telling you on the phone is blah, 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 and the caller ID is masqueraded, it says it's that name of that bank, that's fine. Hang up. Don't answer. Don't click the text. You know who it is. Whatever the problem that's being stated, go to your app. Go to your online. Again, don't click the links to get there. Go on it manually like you normally do. Log into your account. See if that problem manifests or exists. If you're unsure about that and you're not technically savvy, find the phone number from their website and call them and say, hey, listen, I got this weird call. I wanted to call and verify and make sure it's you that are the one that's initiating this, not the inbound false or potentially false whatever it is. Anyway, if it is a real issue, then you'll be able to validate and fix and perform whatever task you need to. I just want to use that. It's just such a huge problem. And AI is so damn good at just tricking people. And it's usually our children, and it's usually the elderly. They get suckered into this 9 times out of 10. But AI is so fantastically good. And as much as I know in technology, I was this close from myself falling part of that scam. I don't know what was going on that day. I guess I let my guard down a little too much. And then I thought through it. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not even taking my own advice that I'm giving you here. So all I can tell you is we're all susceptible. Protect yourself, protect your family, protect your friends, colleagues, and whoever. Spread the word, because this isn't going to get any better anytime soon. Now, if you're a company and you want to protect against this, AI is a must, not an opportunity of maybe exploration. You need to get on this now. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I mean, I know we have limited time and attention of everybody, so let's talk a little bit about an industrial use case that I know very well, which is the AI-powered quality control.
Yep.
This is something, again, machine learning has been doing for quite some time. Lean manufacturing, to be able to look at manufacturing parts, being able to test the output material, and be able to tell you the quality that it's providing. What you can do more with large language models would be really the question. If you're more of the manufacturing, maybe it's liquid, maybe it's solid, maybe it's it's an end user product. So everything is so dependent upon your particular use case. If you're going to be doing a chemical process, right, and being able to monitor the outputs of the chemicals and be able to align that, this is a machine learning problem, a data science problem that has been going on and solved for decades at this point. I mean, I know it's stunning to say almost decades that data science has been a thing, but it's true. Yeah. So, you know, we talked about preventative maintenance and process automation. So with the quality control, this is something that you should know, and in the industrial area, have a better idea. The difference being is probably the cost of AI has gone down tremendously in creating data science models. As we showed on this channel, you could use AI to create the data science models now. So instead of hiring a data scientist, AI can help you create the same kind of output, or at least in a demonstrable form, so that you could prove a concept to get budget for something better than an AI generated model.
Yep. No, I think it's well said there on that. I don't know that I have anything necessarily to add to that. I think the common thread here, and it just to kind of summarize or wrap up, because we're pretty much taking our usual time here, and we don't want to keep you guys too long on this. But I will say in closing or wrapping things up that there are common themes, kind of going back to industry agnostic type of stuff in the strategy. Think of, as you use your AI, as you use or think in terms of agentic, and I think maybe I'll just start there real quick. There is a difference between generative AI and agentic AI. Generative AI is where you ask it to give you an answer, and you write a prompt and you expect a specific outcome, right? It's a kind of a question answer thing, easy in and out. Agentic is its intelligence behind the ask. And usually in an agentic situation, it has tools to do additional jobs. Think about if you hire somebody to do something, you bring them in, you orient them, you say, here's what you do. Here's the tools that we use. Use your computer. These are the resources that are used to create whatever it is we expect you to create. And it's the same thing with the AI. That's all an agentic system is. in the larger scheme of things, everything gets orchestrated by an orchestrator agent, and he brings it all together. So the reason I'm telling you all of that from an architecture standpoint is when you're asking your team to create AI, or if you're doing it yourselves, you should think about it in terms of components, as to not recreate the same thing again and again. Because as you go through the different facets, again, in telecom, there's a retail aspect, there's this, there's that. Find the commonality and create one agent to serve all of these needs, and then you call on that agent to do whatever it is. This will help you in not pulling your hair out and trying to maintain all of these AI. I don't know if you guys have read the news, or even Shawn, you've seen this too, within the news media. There is such a breakdown of people just getting frustrated because stuff is stuck in POCs. It can't get delivered. They can't put it into production. And usually it's security or a lack of measurability or any number of reasons for this. And part of this is it's so unwieldy. It just gets out of control really, really fast because you're just throwing stuff and creating these agents with no real intent past the task level. And this is where people get into trouble. This is where Shawn and I can definitely help you. We work with our customers. We go to market with a lot of different verticals or use cases. Matter of fact, that's all Shawn and I seem to be doing these days, is living and breathing and eating in use cases, not only in helping customers with theirs, but coming up with at least generic enough ones to get the conversation started, just like we're doing here today with you. So if you've heard of something that you like, something that you want to hear about, go to the Transformation Leaders Podcast website, fill out the form, or just hit Shawn and I up on LinkedIn. We've shown you our website and our LinkedIn profiles, really easy to find. Again, Transformation Leaders Podcast. We are here every Wednesday from 12 o'clock noon. And so we kind of took a quick vacation, or end of summer vacation, as we go into the autumn the last 2 weeks, but we're back again. And apologies for the stream. It looks a little different, but we're going to go ahead and fix that for hopefully the next iteration. Time just got away from us as we were on vacation, and unfortunately our platform changed a little bit. So apologies there. Anything else that you want to add, Shawn, before we wrap up?
Certainly. I mean, first of all, I think this was a very good demonstration around use cases. Your use case is the most important use case. There is a lot of bleed across verticals, but not completely. There's plenty of generic use cases that can apply. And the best use case is the one that is consumable by your organization today. So there is a balance between how consumable the use case is and how valuable the use case is. Now, preferably you would want high on both, right? That it's going to be very valuable to you and it's going to be very easily to achieve. And the problem that many of our clients who come to us with a failed use case or failed proof of concept before us is that they have chosen a use case that is high on value and very low on consumable. Their eyes were bigger than their mouths, right? That is the chief issue of why 95% of people have difficulties being successful with AI. If you pick the right path, you will get there quickly. And in that process, you'll get a lot more knowledge, wisdom, and experience of people understanding that AI does work and allow you to go after the more difficult use cases. So I highly recommend reaching out. We love to talk to people about their use cases and how we can get you where you need to be. And as we pointed out, some of these are, hey, they're really, really hard. Be aware. There's some of these that are, you may have to go to a manufacturer of your equipment to get AI. And then there's some that is, hey, you could actually choose between build and buy. So there's not a one-fit-all model on this. is a perfect example of a consultative value prop. And that's where we come in. That's what we do all day long. So really appreciate everyone's time today and look forward to the next conversation we have about transforming your environment.
Excellent. Well, as Shawn said, I think you need to explore all of that. And the most important thing for anybody, the takeaway is you got to get started. So get started somewhere. Anyway, speaking about getting started, we're going to get started on the next task that we got to do. And so will you. We'll see you here next Wednesday. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.